you look at the handout, what we have done is basically to distill the instructions in the Anapanasati Sutta down to the practical experience part of that discourse. There's more to this discourse. If you are curious, you can look it up. So then, in terms of the practical experience of what is taught in this sutta, in this discourse, in this teaching, we have talked about the four preliminaries. Now, into the four tetrads. And the four tetrads, again, if you look at page 5, at the top, the first tetrad pertains to body. Right? And the next, on page 6, pertains to feelings or sensations. Then the third tetrad is mind or minds. And the eighth, on page 8, is phenomena, Dhamma. So these four, often called foundations of mindfulness, it depends on how you translate Satipatthana, the Pali Satipatthana. Foundations of mindfulness is the common translation. But again, I think more work has gone into analyzing these terms. They are less like, when you say foundations of mindfulness, it seems to suggest that mindfulness is built upon these four. But not so much like the foundations in which you build mindfulness, but rather they are the four frames of references. That means four, as I said, increasingly subtle look at basically the question of what's here. So beginning first with body, or the kaya, body. But before we do that, since His Holiness, as I said, teaches this method as a cycle of 16 stages, so let me say something about these 16 stages and these lines that we have taken out from the discourse. When you look at each of these stages, there are some important verbs to pay attention to. And so, for example, in the first four, some of the verbs there, the first two, the important verb there is discern. To discern or to know. Know this, know that. And so the emphasis in these first two steps is not doing anything except for, like paying attention, tuning in, and therefore discern. So the first two verbs here in the first two steps is to discern. Then from 3 onwards, there is one verb that runs through all the rest: to train. To train. To train, to train, to train, to train. So from step 3 onwards to the rest of it, you are actually doing something. You're trying to instigate, in fact, you could call that. You're trying to instigate something. So it's a more active from step 3 onwards. So just note that, okay? Then another verb is to experience. So if you look at 3, experiencing the entire body. 4, calming bodily fabrication. Then 5, 6, 7 is experiencing. 8 is calming. 9 again experiencing. 10 gladdening. 11 concentrating. 12 freeing. 13 observing. 14 observing. 15 observing. 16 observing. So the last 4, train to observe, train to observe, train to observe. So there's a certain rhythm going on here. I don't have much to say beyond. There's a certain rhythm being established throughout these 16 stages. So if you look at 9 to 12, train to do what? Train to experience. Train to gladden. Train to concentrate, meaning bring together, let it all come together. So concentrate, again, maybe not such a good term, such a precise choice. It's the gathering up, gathering together, and then freeing. So train to experience, train to gladden, train to bring together, and train to free. Then 5 to 8, train to experience, train to experience, train to experience, train to calm. Then now, at the first tetrad, discern, discern, train, train. Train to experience and train to calm. So for the first and the second tetrad, the end of the tetrad is to instigate, so to say, to calm, to set this calming effect, put this calming effect into place. And calming what? Calming bodily fabrication and calming mental fabrication. The 2 types of fabrications. So these 2 types of fabrication is part of how the Buddha would describe what's going on right now. What's going on right now? I'm sure all of you have heard, Buddha says there's no soul, or there's no self, or there's no I, there's no you, right? All this can kind of sound rather kind of abstract, philosophical, and maybe sometimes overextended to give the wrong impression that, Buddha says there's no you, there's no me. Sometimes we take that too far. We should relate to everything the Buddha taught as having practical purposes. Practical in the sense of not utilitarian, right? Practical as in these are things to take into your experience, which is the literal translation of the Tibetan that we call practice. Tibetan texts, whenever you read Tibetan texts, when they say, in English, you say, to practice, practice this, practice that. There is a much more, I think, instructive, literal translation, which is to take into experience, to take into your own experience. Your own is not in there, but that's basically the meaning. So Nyamlen is to take into experience, and not like the experience of going to Disneyland. Nyam, like the experience that arises from engaging with these instructions. Take that into so take it into your experience. So instead of speaking in terms of I, or the self, which I guess you could say the Buddha's quarrel, if he has a quarrel, with this notion of self is that he says it's too imprecise. And in the midst of this imprecision, it's not just that it's imprecise and therefore it bugs the accountant or the lawyer. It's in the problem with imprecise is that when it's imprecise, all kinds of messy things arises from there, and then all kinds of suffering arises from there. Then the one producing the suffering and the suffering that arises, in fact, they are products of this imprecision. This imprecision that we just slap a term and, more importantly, a feeling over it and call it I. So once you have this feeling of I, then you have a feeling of me, then you have a feeling of mine. Then once that's all in place, then you, yours, them, theirs, all of that get activated. The fact that they're activated is not yet the problem. The problem is when they are activated and then we have no clue, no understanding of how they have been activated, and therefore both the possibility and the limits of what we have activated. This notion of I, this notion of other, right? So one way the Buddha says, instead of just lazily slapping this label of I onto, any kind of awareness, he says, what's going on now are two sets of fabrication. From moment to moment, bodily fabrication is going on. From moment to moment, mental fabrication is going on. So in other words, what we think of, what we relate to, what we believe to be like what is going on, fancier word, reality, what is going on, reality, we tend to think of that as something kind of given and something sort of floating around out there, and therefore then there's a subject here now somehow experiencing or being shoved into this thing called reality. Now the Buddha says actually what's really going on is this thing that is called reality is but the manifestation of momentarily existing minds from moment to moment to moment. So what we call self is actually just a label that we put over a process of self-making. So it's not like there's absolutely no self. It's that this self is just a very imprecise label that we throw over a process of self-making that is from moment to moment, and it goes on and on and on. And not seeing this is where the messiness arises. Then specifically here in the context of the 16 stages, is the notion that with bodily fabrication and mental fabrication, a lot of heat is produced. So now you have a vehicle whose coolant system is not working. And just like our vehicle that we drive around in, it's a very inefficient object. So much energy is wasted. Right? They say, the car is one of the most inefficient, machines that we've ever created. So much energy is wasted. So the same with the bodily and mental fabrication. It produces a lot of heat in its need to kind of produce and reproduce itself and maintain itself, a lot of heat is generated. So the Buddha gave one teaching called the fire sermon, the fire discourse, where he says everything is on fire. In particular, the aggregates are on fire. So we need to learn how to cool this fire, how to calm, how to pacify, how to tranquilize this fabrication. So now, body first. What is body? What is body, right? So body, this word at least in English, it's really loaded. So we should consider, how did we go from, right? Flesh, skin, bones, tendons, muscles, and all the lubrication necessary for all of this to work. How did we go from basically a pile of that into this notion of body, right? So there's already a whole layer of like body being, we say, imputed on a bunch of physical processes. Then so much so, and this goes deeper than just language. So much so that, there is the phenomena of phantom limbs. And that's how strong. It's not just a matter of language we have the word body. As a mental imprint, even after you have lost a physical hand, the mental imprint is so strong that you can feel pain for a limb that no longer exists. And so this is how much, how powerful this projection of body actually is. So here when the Buddha says work with the body, and as I said, there's another teaching and set of practices where he goes more deeply into the various ways and degrees of relating to what we habitually call body. Included in that is the famous practice of reflecting on or bringing into focus. Reflecting makes it sound like something you do at the spa, This is the opposite of what you would do at the spa. Are you familiar with the asubha, they call it, the impure, the unclean nature of this body, where you bring into focus, how like, yuck, this is. I mean, just start with, like, not literally, but just mentally, right? Peel off your skin. Or peel off whoever skin that you think is so attractive. Whoever you think is very attractive, now mentally, not just undress them, unskin them. Right? Go one step further. After undressing them, you unskin them. And then they are standing there like that. Yeesh. The conceits that we walk around with is really literally just skin deep. So in the Asubha meditation, which some say, oh, that's so negative. Yeah, that's your value judgment. Is it true or not? Right? It's more basic than negative or positive self-image, body image, right? Not to dismiss that there's a whole set of issues there. And so I always, I'm, at least in my mind, I'm careful about footnoting to say, hey, I'm not dismissing that there's a whole set of real problems that people face with, body image and all of that. Now, putting that aside, listen to what the Buddha has said, like this body, whatever you think is so attractive, yourself, and others. And interestingly, he says, being attracted to someone else's beauty is grounded in your self-obsession with your own beauty. He says that, yeah. It's an interesting psychological analysis of the nature of desire and wantings. He says it's grounded in you think this is so nice, this is so attractive. Then now this needs to find something out there. So he says, peel off this layer of skin, and do you think this is still attractive? And if you really think about it, whatever that comes into contact with this body quickly becomes a problem. Wear your clothes for a few days, now you have to wash it. Stay in the room for a few days, now you have to air it. Our entire economy is based on hiding this fact. Food, even food, right? Have you thought about this? No matter how delicious the food is, and how much you like to eat, and you all know I like to eat, right? Try this. Really delicious. Will you put it back in your mouth? No. I won't. Suddenly it's you're like, that's really yucky. But what has changed? Nothing. It's your mouth, it's your saliva, it's your chewing. It's the same thing that was so attractive. But once you spit it out, you would not spoon it back in and go, So that's body, That's one aspect of body. That's one aspect of body. It's not the whole story, but often we ignore this. So Buddha says, from under the right circumstance, bring your attention to this aspect of body. Not in here. In here, he doesn't want to trigger your body issues. Yeah. Even in the set of meditating with body as the object, this is the unclean is only one piece in a larger program. First he starts with breath, then he starts with movement, then he goes to stillness, I think, then he goes to the unclean, and then he goes to the elements. And he takes you further than just that. It's just a stepping stone. But it's a useful one. When we become so tethered to this. Yeah? So now let's come back to this text when it talks about body. So first of all, when it talks about body, the broader some of the background understanding you need to have, I feel, is that so when Buddha talks about body, the Buddha says, so there is body and there is mind, and these two words are talking about physical processes and mental emotional processes. So now let's talk about physical processes. So to talk about that, the Buddha used a very, you could say, simple, but enough. It covered the basis, which is, I call it the Buddhist periodic table. The Buddhist periodic table has only 4 elements, not 118. I finally looked up to see how many members are in our most current periodic table. Apparently 118. When I went to high school, it was 90 whatever. I don't know when some of you went to high school. Maybe it was 4 too. Which means you're doing right, you're still here. If your high school periodic table is 4 elements, which is the Buddha's periodic table, 4. But 4 is sufficient for what he wants us to see about this body. He says there are the 4 elements. So it's called wind, fire, water, and earth. So these are the 4 elements. And what makes the 4 elements possible is space. So sometimes that's called a fifth. But space is technically not an element. But space is what makes it possible for these four elements to come together. So what wind is talking about movement and basically motility. What fire is vitality. And then, the grosser aspects of that would be heat. Then what water is fluidity. And then, of course, the grosser aspects of that would be, all the bodily fluids. And then earth is the solidity. Then the grosser aspects would be the bones, all the hard, parts of this physical constitution. And so it's not just like the elements themselves, like the atomic level of the coming together of these four elements, and to then have this body, but it's also, like you could say, the energetic aspects of these four elements. So when the earth element is functioning well, it's when we feel stable. When the earth element is not functioning well, it's triggered, it's inflamed, then we feel sluggish. Yeah? To feel grounded and to feel sluggish, it's actually same. It's just balance or off balance. Vitality, that digestive heat, that manifests as digestive heat, when it's disturbed, it becomes like anger. Anger that then can turn into hatred. Not just angry, but hate, wanting to cause harm. But vitality is also needed. Likewise, with water, the fluidity is what allows things to be smooth. But it can also be all over the place. Wind is the lightness, but it could also mean, lacking control. Things are, even in language we say, right? Things are spinning out of control. That's the wind element. So there's also the energetic aspect of the elements that is part of the understanding of body and bodily fabrication. Then more specifically, there's another level of this body that speaks of the winds. These are energies, but using the analogy of wind. So wind energies, prana, lung in Tibetan. This is already in, sometimes people think, oh, this is in Vajrayana. No. It's already in Abhidharma. Buddha already talked about the 5 types of winds, the 5 types of life energy that's coursing through this body. And this body, when Soreness teaches this, he will also at some point talk about three types of bodies that we have. The most obvious is this physical body. Alongside this physical body is the mental emotional body. There's the mental emotional body. Mental emotional body, there are various aspects of that. One aspect of that is part of how we think of who we are. I don't know if you have looked into this, but you could, for fun, just kind of look into what does your mental, emotional body look like? There's usually a look to it. And have you considered this? It's usually some version of you when you're 21 or 16 or 4 or... Yeah. That's part of the mental, emotional body that we carry around. So that when people call your name, you actually have a mental image of that responding. That is part of this mental, emotional body. It has a certain shape. And so they say, like very advanced meditators, like Buddhists, they can see that body of yours. And then spirits also can see that body. And then when spirits see that body, depending on whether they are malevolent or benevolent, they know what to appear as to terrorize that person. So there is this mental, emotional body that we have. Then bridging the two is what in the Vajrayana sources, they call it the Vajra body. And what is the Vajra body? I think the Vajra body is sometimes also translated as the subtle body. Or I sometimes call it the energetic body. And that is the bridge that bridges the mental, emotional body and the physical body. So underlying this physical body is a network that is energetic. And this is not just Vajrayana. TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Tibetan medicine, has mapped out a whole kind of these what's normally translated as channels, meridians basically, that energy courses through this whole network of meridians, of nodes, where they branch out, and those are called the chakras. The branching out of these meridians up to 72,000 channels to every part of this body. I have recently started to think about this in terms of the central nervous system. I think it's related to that too. So that the most basic explanation of these channels says that there is the central channel with the left and right channels that run parallel to it. I'm starting to see how it may be analogous. I won't be so bold to say that it's exactly, but it's definitely related. The central nervous system. So in the Vajra body, there's a central channel that runs up and down. So then the modern medical central nervous system is the brain down to the spine, right? Then in terms of that, right, we have the autonomic nervous system that branches out into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is the one that is responsible for fight or flight. Then the parasympathetic is the one that says rest and recuperate or reproduce, whatever you have chosen. I think that is really related to the left and right channel. What's called the Roma, Kyongma, and Lalana and Rasana. Because there also they say that the left and right channels, the Lalana, the left channel, and the right channel is related to when in a state of disorder, these three channels is where the three poisons kind of are in charge. So the central is ignorance, and the left is desire, and the right is aversion. So our two autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic is, I think, this anger aspect when it goes out of whack. And then the parasympathetic is the kind of the desire part. Anyway, right? So whatever the kind of different mappings and language that you use, I think we can help to understand this body beyond just the skin level. Right now, the body and the heart is inflamed. So meaning, in the normal functioning of the nervous system, you need a balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. But most of us now are suffering from the sympathetic nervous system continuously being triggered. So it's inflamed. Inflammation, if you want to use that language, it's part of the healthy functioning of the body, right? It's saying, hey, something is not right here. Please pay attention. But at this point, every part of the body is inflamed. And ironically, I think this happened because we figure out what to do with real tigers. Yes, put them in zoos. So once we got rid of the real tigers, we brought in imaginary tigers that we imagine to be lurking around everywhere. And so then we are constantly walking around. Then on top of that, we have a whole economic system built on, right, reproducing more tigers and more tigers and more tiger traps, right? The more tiger traps they come up with will only give rise to more tigers. And the whole point is to sell you tiger traps. To make you think like, there are thieves, there are robbers, you need to, have a good defense system, right? On and on and on and on. That's part of the inflammation of the heart, the inflammation of the body. In order to, I think, kind of draw more, you could say, benefit from doing the first four, I think it is important to have some of this baseline understanding. And so this is how we say view affects what comes after. So in one discourse the Buddha gave about the Noble Eightfold Path, you've heard of that? Yeah. It begins with, so the Eightfold Path is eightfold in that, it's not literally linear. Fold has that sense of it has to all come together. But there's a way to understand it as well in a linear way that is related to here. Like you might say, why are you talking so much? Can we just meditate? Right? I often get that, and they're probably right. I could talk less. But what to say? I have a PhD. That's probably right. But then at the same time, I would say, no, actually, most of the words of the Buddha is the Buddha talking. And the Buddha isn't talking about meditating. Right? We have a translator of the Buddha's word here. Full-time translator of the Buddha's word. Yeah? Most of the time, Buddha is talking. I mean, if the scriptures were all about Buddha meditating, then there's nothing to say. And then he meditated, and then multiplied by how many thousand pages of, and then he meditated. I mean, joking aside, the Buddha really emphasized a lot on getting the right understanding, the right view. Because from there, it begins to unfold. Yeah, so view is really important. So that is often listed as the first of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's translated as right, but not so much about right and wrong. It's like, clear, unmistaken. Right? So you begin with view. And view is like foundational matters. Yeah, you need to understand, when we talk about body, what are we really talking about? It's not what we habitually think what it is. There are so many layers to body. So from view, right? From view comes, in this one teaching the Buddha gave, he says, from, here he actually uses in the negative, he says, when you have the wrong understanding, then what arises from there is mistaken thoughts. Mistaken thoughts meaning mistaken intentions. Unskillful thoughts, unskillful intentions. And from there arises wrong speech. Both internal speech and external dialogue. From wrong speech, internal and expressed, arises wrong actions. Wrong actions lead to wrong livelihood. Wrong livelihood takes us into committing more to that in the form of wrong effort, then wrong mindfulness, then wrong focus, meditation. And from wrong meditation, wrong focus, wrong intentions, that's not part of the Noble Path, then leads to bondage. So reversing all of that is the Eightfold Path, which is right view or understanding leads to right thought, right speech, right effort, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi, right stability. And from there, then right intentions lead to liberation. And so, yes, it's good. You say, I want to train this now. I want to train this down. But you need to get this, kind of this whole sequence into place. Okay, now the technique itself. So already in the preliminary, which for most of us may be training for a sustained period on the preliminaries, just being present to the experience of breath, like that prayer wheel, getting used to, getting good at turning it. And the way you turn that is when you start, by the way, you put some effort into getting it to turn. Then after that, you cannot. Anyone who has ever turned a prayer wheel. After that, it's just very slight movement. Then it will continue to turn smoothly. That's same with this, At first, you make a turn, then you just have to stay. In fact, if you try to do more, then it will not work. It won't turn smoothly. Same here. Start with the foundation. Always mindful, breathe in, mindful, breathe out. And as I said, different traditions of meditation have come up with very, kind of confident statements about it should be here, it should be here. And some even somewhere at the back of your nose, where it hits, I think in the end, it's up to you. For me, what has worked really more natural and good, and I also attribute some bigger benefit, is to feel, I think I gave that, I shared that instruction of like feeling the body, the entire body expanding and contracting, like this pulsing balloon. Pulsing, 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 the entire. Because step 3, it does take us there. The whole body breathing. So if you, from the beginning, anchor this awareness of breath, not here, not down here, but the whole body, then when you get to the 3rd stage, it's very easy. Also, the other thing is, I think, for you type A types, this is not so good. You get very tense. Then we don't really have a tradition of meditating on the 3rd eye. That makes you even more crazy. So good news, in this tradition, we don't, you don't need to, focus more here. It just make you more crazy. And in fact, it's not even here. Generally, in the Vajrayana traditions, it's here, the belly. And so if you train more the belly, I think there are good side effects. First of all, most of us breathe very shallow. So if you put a hand here, like right now, put your hand here, right? And then you pay attention to your breath, see which hand is moving. In and out. Immediately when I ask you to do this without me telling you next, you know you want your lower hand to move and not your upper hand. Because that's the natural. But we have mostly fallen out of the natural. So we're just breathing very shallow here. And so in this, using the whole body, feeling the body expand, contract, you actually deepen your breath. But without deliberately trying to deepen. So that's the advantage that I see. But then again, each of us is different. Right? You have to take it into your own experience. You have to develop the path. The path is not like some road that you kind of grope around until you find the road and then you get on it. Then everyone else who's on that road you will see. That's not how the path is. The path is a metaphor, right? The path to enlightenment is speaking of your process. But the limits of that metaphor is sometimes, with teachers and traditions being so insistent about how effective their way of doing things, inadvertently, it gives this idea that the relationship between you and the path is once you find the path, everything will happen according to the, manual. That's not how it works. So with regards to the 4th Noble Truth, the Buddha says, develop. Actually, in the first teaching on the 4 Noble Truths, the turning of the wheel of Dharma, not only are there 4 Noble Truths, but for each Noble Truth there's a verb given. And most of the time people forget that. With regards to suffering, recognize. With regards to the cause of suffering, relinquish. With regards to the end of suffering, experience, taste. With regards to the path, develop. So that means we have to take responsibility. And you have permission, if that's what you think you need, you already have permission to take into your own experience how this works. Right? So the Buddha is pointing in a particular direction. In the end, we have to look ourselves. Yeah? So here, from the preliminary, we go to the first tetrad. It says, breathing in long, you should discern, I am breathing in long. Breathing out long, you should discern, I am breathing out long. Here, it seems to suggest, yeah, you wouldn't be wrong to think, oh, so I should breathe long now? And sometimes it is taught that way, that you should kind of deliberately now go, it's not exactly saying that. I think it's actually describing something that is happening naturally. Because it's not that you start this practice with step one. The practice starts where? In the foundation. And in the foundation, you are already mindfully breathe in, mindfully breathe out. So there you are already allowing your process of breath to arise and cease more naturally. And as your body and mind calm down, your breath will become longer. And so, in a way, yes, on the preliminary side, you want to look for this, not force, but you want to look for signs that indeed you're going in the right direction because your breath is now becoming longer and longer. And that's when you start to note. So it's more natural. You're not trying to force. Although having said that, in the preliminary level, when you first start, do take a few deep breaths in and out. But then after that, don't put effort there anymore. Just leave it to be natural. Then naturally it will begin to settle into longer inhalations and exhalation. That is when you know, I'm now in step 1 of 16. That's why it says discern. When you hit the point where you can tell, you can discern, oh, it's slowed down now. Then, yes, then you discern, now it's going long in, long out. Long in, long out. Follow until now? Then you go, wait. Then it becomes short? There's 2 types of short breath, actually. There is the shortness of breath that is short. That's not what's supposed to be going on here. It's not saying, now that you have calmed yourself, imagine a tiger chasing you. You have to make it short and you go, okay, now it's short. It's not short in that sense. In a different version of the 16 steps, both found in the Chinese and the Tibetan, in some other texts, not the Anapanasati, the first step is said to naturally breathe in and out. The second step is said to be, when it's long, know that it's long. When it's short, know that it's short. So it could happen that way too. But here, when it says first long, then short. So what is this second short? So I think, again, without being rigid about it, you could practice it both ways. In the other alternative list, the beginning 2 steps is, first step is just naturally turn attention to breath. Then second, when it's long, just know, now it's long. When it's short, just know it's short. But when it's listed here, and this version gets repeated in more places. So if you want to kind of try to imagine what was going on, I think the Buddha probably tried both ways. But after a while, he committed to this one, the long and the short, as step 1 and 2. Here, this short is talking about, there is the short when you are, all over the place. Then, when you know how to let body and mind settle, then it becomes long. But at a deeper level of calm, it's short again now. Why? Because the body doesn't need that much oxygen. The body is no longer needing so much oxygen. And this is not something that you should force. This is not pranayama, like breath control. It's like at a deeper level of calm. It's short, it's also subtle. Almost like you might feel like you're not breathing anymore. When I first started this kind of practice, I was maybe 13. There was one retreat that I kind of freaked out because I would, I know intellectually what is going on, but in the middle of sessions, I would go, because like you think you have stopped breathing, but it's not. It's become so subtle and short. And the gap between inhalation and exhalation is extended. So breath becomes short. Then you should just discern, don't panic. No, you're still breathing. If you're dead, you would know. Well, at least the moment before you're dead, you'll know, So if that's not happening, just relax, So this second one is really talking about short in that way. It's become more subtle now. And almost you feel like you're not breathing. And in fact, yes, your body doesn't need that much oxygen. So it's become subtle. Then the third stage. Now you breathe in, experiencing the entire body. So you go from breath to now body. And this is the pulsing of the body. The entire body. In one tradition, and this can be found across these 3 languages, there is one tradition of interpreting entire body as the entire body of breath, and not this body. But here, we take the interpretation of it's this body. It's this entire body now. So in a way, if you started with here, and some of us have to start here, if your kind of mental, emotional, physical build-up is such that you are more easily kind of scattered, then here is useful. But if you're not that type, right? But if you're that type, at stage 3, you are making breath into a less focused object and a more diffuse object. So the whole body is breathing in and out. And this becomes a bridge for the 4th, which is I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. Training yourself with I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. Now here, what is going on? You are now doing something more than just breathing. You are instigating something to happen. And this has some resemblance to daily affirmations. but not exactly, okay? I don't want to give the wrong idea. Huh? You are beautiful. You are beautiful. Look at the mirror, you know. But here there is something you are saying, you know. Whatever word you use mentally, basically as you breathe in and out, it's not just being aware of the breath, but think of the breath as calming the body. Experience the calming effects of your breath. Particularly, allow yourself now to dwell on the feeling of wellness and goodness, and enjoy that feeling. It's the fourth step. You calm bodily fabrication just as you would calm a child that is distressed. It's okay, it's okay. So whatever kind of light mental, emotional words, some of us work with words, some of us work more intuitively, bring up that word, that intuition, and say, calm, calm, calm. You know, let everything settle, let everything settle, let everything settle. And that's how you calm bodily fabrication. Those who don't use the 16 stages, in part they don't use it because they feel like this is like you're forcing something. But actually, it's not forcing. It's like, I think sometimes we think, I don't now, speaking of translation, we can have a debate or fight later. I don't like the word meditate. I think it's a terrible word. It doesn't always work in English, but 9 out of 10 times it works to substitute meditate on, right? Very common, meditate on. Substitute it with cultivate. I don't know. English is not my first language, but when I hear meditate on, I think this, right? Place your mind on this. But actually, most of the exercises that the Buddha gave is much more active than simply placing the mind there. Like meditate on as if there is something that exists in and of itself out there, which again, from the very basic kind of Buddhist understanding, that's not true. It's something that you cultivate, which has its roots in the language, in Sanskrit. Bhavana, which again translated as meditation, in the Buddha's own time was chiefly an agricultural term, used by farmers, used by growers. And they use that word for the work that they do in the fields. We are bhavanaing, we are cultivating the land. Some people who study these ancient etymologies said that in the Buddha's own time, other spiritual figures were using different verbs for what they understand this inner work is about. And some are more interested in transcending, so the language of transcending is what they use more. But the Buddha's term was a very kind of commonly used term with regards to farming. No surprise, actually, because his family background is farming, although we call him, like a prince, a king, but their main kind of economic activity for his people was basically farming. So he uses this farming metaphor. And so it's the work of cultivation. And so we cultivate. So in this work of cultivating, we're not just passively waiting for calming to turn up. You're not like passively waiting for a state of calm to suddenly, fall from the sky. Now, it's also true, you cannot yell yourself into calming, right? George Costanza and his family. Serenity now! Serenity now! Those of you who remember Jerry Seinfeld. It's also not the case that you keep yelling, serenity now, and then bodily fabrications can be calmed. But it's also not, just wait until it happens. So you kind of instigate it at the fourth stage. As a practical thing, you may say, now, how do I actually proceed? If you take the stages and use it as like one session, do go through the 4 stages. Start with the preliminary, and then go stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. At the beginning, it will be more getting the steps familiar. Not just familiar up here, familiar to the heart and familiar to the body. So at the beginning, don't expect the kind of results that I'm talking about. You are kind of memorizing words and memorizing the stages. But be patient and know that as you become more familiar mentally, emotionally, and physically to these 4 stages, the 4 stages begin to happen. Then the first stage, the transition becomes less and less artificial. Especially the breathing becoming short in the second one, right? At first, it is a little kind of fake it until you make it. But don't think of it as that is how it will unfold. Think of it more at the point that you feel like you're faking it as I'm getting used to the exercise, the movements. It's sort of like the equivalent of like learning Tai Chi movements. At first, you're just mimicking the movement as it is shown to you. And at first, it doesn't feel natural because you are trying to remember shift weight to the back, shift weight to the front. As you're shifting weight, you should be breathing in. As you're shifting here, you're breathing out. And then the hands and the feet and the waist needs to move, right? So at the beginning, just like this, it's a little clunky. But that's what practice is. Then at a certain point, everything flows. And you're no longer thinking. But at the beginning, you have to think, you have to memorize. So it requires, patience with these first 4 stages, and then the corresponding stages actually becomes, in a way, easier. Same also, in like Tai Chi sequences. At first, once you get the basic movements from the level of needing to think to the level of needing to feel, and then to the level of you don't even need to really feel, you just flow, then the rest will unfold actually a lot easier. Questions? Now you can look at these first 4, and both people with us up there and people Are you in France, Theodore? Okay. Not sure where you are these days.
On going back to 3,
Mm-hmm.
I will breathe in and out, experiencing the
Entire body, yes.
Just where my brain goes with this is actually is more about an imagery or an imagination or something like that. And is that the right idea?
Is it an image? It may come up like that, but steer away from that. But more like the sensation of expanding, contracting. Yeah. Some of us are more visually oriented than others. So it varies, But the point is not so much the thinking, but the feeling of body expanding, contracting. So that what's happening in third is because in fourth you want to use this experience of breath to tranquilize, right? So now it's extending breath to all parts of the body. You see, it's a bridge to the fourth one. So that the whole mass of bodily fabrication can be tranquilized, can be pacified. Yeah. Yes?
The translation into the English word fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
Can you offer a little more about where's that coming from? What's actually a fabrication?
Yeah, so fabrication means put together. Not falsifying so much. The sense here is, can you see that is composite? Can you see that it's put together? So the composite nature of this body, so samskara or sankhara, and then the further emphasis is it's a dynamic process. So the body is not a thing. The body is a aggregation of processes. And then when you have process, you have heat generated. And then the burdensome nature of that. And what do we have to do with the burdensome nature? Relinquish. We don't need to do a lot. Just put it down. So in a way, if we want to calm the fabrication, first we have to see the fabrication. But not like intellectually see. Okay, so some practical instructions, especially at the beginning when you are kind of just going through the motions, so to say. So in fact, I have suggested to people, and I have some recording, or you find someone with a more pleasant voice to record this. Almost like have a recording and play it, so that you don't have to read. Sometimes reading triggers certain things in some of us. And then we get into the mode of like, thinking, So you have a recording of this playing for your 1 hour session or half an hour session. And then you listen to the instructions. That may actually work better. And so during that time, when you hear, breathing in, I calm bodily fabrication. Breathing out, I calm the bodily fabrication. So at that time, you could say, so it's also like Tai Chi. Weight is being shifted, 70, 30, then emptying of weight on one foot, all weight on another foot. In a way, what are the 2 feet here? One is the breath, and one is the task at hand for each of them. each of the 4 steps. The first one, discern, discern. The third one, experience the whole body. The fourth one, calming. Maybe the most mysterious, the calming. Right? So when you get to the calming part, maybe 70%, on some days, 70% is still on the breath, in, out. Then 30% of, okay, in going in and out, I'm calming, I'm tranquilizing, I'm cooling down the heat that arises from this fabrication. But sometimes it's 70% of that and 30% of remembering breath in between. So especially when it feels like 70% or whatever, like the number is just random. If you're mostly doing the calming, in order to do the calming, you have to be aware of where it is not calm. And so what you can do there is begin to kind of, how to put it, let me find the right words. Beginning to pay attention or to take note of anywhere in the body that is particularly tense, or if there's an obvious pain. Then lean into that rather than trying to smooth it over. Lean into that, and then as you breathe in, right? And it could be a mental image, but again, try to pull yourself out of the mental image. But if it helps, you could also use the mental image of when you breathe in, think of breath going there. Whether it's a tightness in the shoulder or a pain in the lower back, breathe in there. If mental image helps, use it, but drop it as soon as you can feel it going there. In the teachings it says, where the mind goes, the lung goes, the life energy goes. So something is actually going there. Maybe not literally breath, but oxygen, right, goes into your heart. The lungs goes into the heart, mixes with the blood, and then blood is delivered, right? That's how the oxygen goes to all parts of your body. So there is something going there. Except that here we say, when the mind goes, the energy goes there. Yeah. So this is information from more like Vajrayana side. And this is how like His Holiness teaches this whole.
Questions on kind of this side.
Yes.
So are there any specific visualizations at that point?
No need to visualize. Feel.
Well, I understand that aspect,
Yes.
but are there any specific visualizations that might be outside of what we're actually
No.
teaching right here, that help assist with that, I guess would be
Assist with what?
with the calming aspect of feeling.
Whatever you need.
Okay.
If your internal world is filled with colors and fireworks, then you need more color and fireworks to deliver. Some of our internal world is not so colorful. Yes.
So I, a long time ago, tried, because I had a teacher that mentioned Goenka, and I tried that for a couple of sittings during a retreat.
Yeah.
And it brought so much energy into my head that my head was just pounding. And so what works for me is, because I have an old injury that sometimes comes up.
Yes.
But I noticed that you mentioned a minute ago where the mind goes, energy goes.
Yes.
So I bring my breathing down and finish in
Yes.
my hands.
Right.
And they get warm.
Yes.
They tingle.
Yes.
So how does
Absolutely.
that warmth and fit in the fire, idea of being on fire.
Yes.
Fit with calm.
That's the, in Chinese medicine, we call that's real fire, that's good fire.
Yeah.
Then there's the false fire, and that's the bad fire.
So this is the good, to have
Yes,
my hands
yes,
warm.
yes. Metaphorically, we say everything is on fire.
Yeah.
And then more precisely, remember I talked about the 4 elements? There is fire as vitality, which is digestive vitality. Then with regards to the body, yes, it is talking about digestion. But it's beyond digestion. It's also how we digest ideas, how we digest emotions, how we digest on so many levels. That's all fire energy.
So that kind of heating, the more concentrated as it
Yes.
is, the more warmth gathers.
Yes, more warmth gathers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that kind of energy is a good
Yeah.
consuming. So it has implications, for example, in Tibetan medicine, there is tremendous concern with the ability of the body to absorb the nutrients, the ability of the body to absorb the medicine. Yeah. In contrast, Western allopathic medicine doesn't seem to be that concerned about. And it has to do with also our material world, our material availability. So material availability in this culture is never, relatively, right? We're never short of that. So now, what we pee out is clogging our oceans and rivers because there's over nutrients. But in a context and culture where nutritional value is a premium, like in the highlands of Tibet where you don't have such a range of nutrients. So the medical tradition that developed from there is acutely concerned about whatever little nutrients you can get, make sure the body can take all of it and retain it and use it. So they're very concerned about that issue. So my Tibetan doctor friends, would say, yeah, these days, you guys just worry about what pills to pop. Most of it just comes out. It goes through because it's not absorbed by the body. So that has to do with vitality, fire, the real fire. Then there is the false fire. Yeah, so here, right? It works really well in indigenous cultures, where naturally people are content to sit the whole day just and content. It's a little too loose. So bringing this to here. But this culture is do, No, here. Yes.
So my experience, and what somebody was saying, is like I experienced a lot of like bodily traumas growing up. So like I spent most of my young life like really disassociated from my body.
Yes.
A lot of time
Yeah.
in my head.
Yes.
So for me, actually using a little bit of like visualization has helped me kind of connect
Sure.
mind and body. Like, because when I find the tension and like I breathe into that area, like
Yes.
you're saying, like I imagine it softening. And
Yes.
then when I breathe out, like I can kind of picture that
Yes.
tension leaving my
Pulling
body.
out.
So that kind of
Sure.
really helps kind of connect that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
bridge that gap.
Yeah.
So.
You have to, and the wall. There isn't a wall, in between visualizing and feeling. These are just our words. But I kind of am more careful about not overusing visualizing, mainly because of the way people understand Tibetan Buddhist practice. Or misunderstand. They think it's a lot of visualizing, that you need to have this fantastic ability to have, hold on to, full technicolor imaginary world going on up in your head. And they think that's what the practice is. No, it's not. This word, some, has such a range of meanings. It can be imagine, it can be think, it can be feel, it can be, at least as a practice. Did people type questions? Yeah. Too stable. Any questions from Zoom? You can unmute and just speak, or comments.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's learning how to cultivate
Yes.
that line between being from a very visual culture, visualization, and felt sense, and
Yes.
how to bring them in balance and understand when they're out of balance.
Correct. Yes. And that the felt sense is when is in a way the result. The visualization and the thinking, depending on how we are constituted, should take us to the felt sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we're constituted more toward the felt sense,
Uh-huh.
but even though I'm from a visual culture,
Uh-huh.
I've
Yes.
always lived more in that felt sense.
Uh-huh.
Then that's also a lack, isn't it? 'Cause
That's also a what?
A lack, not a balance.
It
Or is that
depends.
okay to live in that world?
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Because the felt sense is where it's actually something is happening in a deeper level.
Yeah. Well, I'm a yoga teacher, so I work with that
Uh-huh. Yes.
a lot.
Right, right.
And I try to bring that in the teachings,
Yes.
because it seems to me that's what's out of balance in this culture.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you feel like you need to work on the more visual, the more verbal,
Yeah.
do it for the sake of others.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the bodhicitta. Do it for the sake of others.
And I do have some questions
Yes.
online. One is from Laura Herman. Is there a recommended time length for each stage?
Yeah, a whole day. At the beginning, you basically, whatever time length you can afford, you feel you can afford, you want to do for that day, right? Then you equally divide into 4 parts at the beginning to kind of familiarize. Then after a while, it becomes more and more natural. And when you are able to, you have the ability to kind of listen more carefully, not neurotically, but listen more carefully to what is needed in the moment, you will know to dwell longer in second or third or fourth or 1 or preliminary. So I think at the beginning, maybe it's helpful again to, I think there is a recording somewhere, maybe somebody, our master list person, Jeff, may be able to tell us if there's a recording of me leading this that you can just play. Or you go find someone else to read this to you and record it, At the beginning, that might be helpful to just listen to the instructions.
I'll see what I can find.
Hey, we could make an app. Next.
And then from Rajani is, can this help cool off inflammation for those who suffer from sciatica nerve pain or degenerative illnesses? I assume that's with it.
Yeah, you would think, but don't stop, taking the medicine that you're taking. We are not Christian scientists, and we won't pray the illness away. But mind and body is so connected that if we know how to cool down in this way, for sure it will help. Yeah. But how quickly and how it can or cannot substitute other things that you're doing, I won't go that far to say, oh yes, do this and then you can fire your doctor. Like, for example, pain, right? Pain is such an imprecise experience in terms of experiencing it and measuring it. And so then I think with things like that, what you can do with your mind would make a difference. Yes.
Okay, so this, I'm having a little trouble with the word fabrication as well. And I jump to the next section, and they say, I will breathe in experiencing mental fabrication, which over here I will just breathe in experiencing the entire
Yes.
body, but if I also put in
Yes.
bodily fabrication.
Yes.
there.
Experience bodily fabrication.
So to me, bodily fabrication might be pain,
Yes.
discomfort,
Yes.
but wouldn't also pleasure or,
Here, no need to target that.
okay, so
Yeah.
it's just whatever's coming up
Yes.
that's related to your body.
Yes, fabrication here means, right, as I said, is to see the composite nature and then the burdensome nature of it being composite, and then being willing to let go of that burden.
So that's pretty deep.
Yeah.
And that would take
Yeah.
a long time.
Yes.
It seems to get to that.
Yeah, all short, who knows?
Yeah, and then you want to calm it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So does that calming kind of come out of that?
No, you put the intention there,
You have
and
to,
then you
yeah.
let your breath do that work.
Okay.
Yeah, so you breathe into it, as they say. When I taught this a while back in, what's this place on the other side of Atlanta? This military town? Fort, it's maybe 1 hour
Fort
away
Bragg.
from Atlanta. Fort Bragg, yes. Yeah, that area. One time I was teaching there. And there were some people from the base that turned up, but there was also a nun, an American nun in the Tibetan tradition, that maybe family was there. She was maybe in her 80s. And we were doing actually the body retreat, mindfulness of the body. And second day of retreat, she said, oh, for years I keep hearing about how you breathe in and and you can ease the pain, and he says, I never really understood, but now I think I know what this, and I tried it and it worked. And it's not credit to me. I think it's just paying attention deeply to what the Buddha is saying and then following that.
And I
You-
noticed that a lot
yeah.
of times the pain is just mental.
Mhm.
It's not really
Yes.
in the body.
Yes.
It's all your
Or at least a big
concepts.
chunk of it.
Yeah, it's your concepts.
Yeah, it's a
about
big
it.
chunk of it is the mental burden that you carry.
Yeah.
I mean, some Buddhist traditions will say it's entirely. And, if you're sold on that, great. But I don't think you need to be sold on that for this to work. For this to work, you just need to say, or you need to understand or accept, like a big chunk of it is the mental, emotional baggage that we carry around physical experiences. And then recognizing that, being willing to set that aside. And then already a lot of relief can come from that. Then more importantly, it's not just about, a lot of relief can come. When we begin to train this in this way, then we also, more importantly, learn not to pick it up in the first place. It's good. You notice, in the next section, right? Stage 7 and 8 are basically about calming mental fabrication. But here the Buddha actually gives a whole section to experiencing mental fabrication. So in different commentaries on the 16 stages, they say that stage 3, which pertains to the body, when it says experiencing the entire body, you are going in that direction of experiencing the fabricated nature of body. Yeah, it's not explicit. And in fact, if I remember correctly, there is one version. I said, this list of 16 turns up in different places. In one list, the third is actually, instead of saying experiencing the entire body, it replicates what's said in the mental fabrication. It says breathing in, experience mental bodily fabrication. So sometimes the commentary says these are actually synonyms. But you can see, even if they're not synonyms, they are moving in that direction. So when I was answering a question from here about the fabrication, I said, so the way you do it is actually you first need to experience the bodily fabrication. And concretely, right, what are we talking about? As concrete as we can talk about. It's paying attention then specifically to like tightness, to pain, to uncomfortable experiences of the body. Interestingly, like in the sensation part, right, which we'll cover tomorrow morning, in the sensation part, elsewhere the Buddha would say, insofar as these three sensations, and so sensation is better translation than feelings, Feelings is, at least the way we use the word feeling, it's talking about much more developed emotional matters. The subject of songs. Feelings, right? It's not that. Yeah, here it's very subtle and three types: painful, pleasurable, and neutral. And from these three, painful, pleasurable, and neutral, towards the painful, aversion. Towards the pleasurable, attachment. Towards the neutral, like ignorance. So these are the beginnings of the three poisons. But it's precognitive. That's another interesting point, because perception has not occurred yet. That comes after. So Buddhist psychology gives this insight that like, dislike, and don't care is so subtle that it happens precognitive. Because only after that you cognize and you make connections. And then after that, stories spin out. That's the mental formations. So in other areas, in other places where Vedana is talked about, this sensation is talked about, it says all three sensations should be understood clearly and to be kind of dropped. Here, the Buddha is picking one type of sensation to focus on, the sensation of pain, and to replace the sensation of pain with the sensation of pleasure. Because when you go to the third part, the second tetrad, Before experiencing mental fabrication, right, and calming fabrication, the first two steps in that tetrad is training in two happy states. One is called piti, translated as rapture, and one is called sukha, translated here as happiness. And piti and sukha. So actually, here the Buddha wants you to be happy. Don't worry, be happy. You're like, wait, isn't that also part of confusion? Yes, yes, don't worry. Now just learn how to experience these uplifting states first. Because you need to put body and mind in a good place before you go poke the nest. that yellow jacket nest is coming. The third tetrad is gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind. That's, really some important insights, Like you're not going to reach samadhi by forcing. It only can be reached by gladdening. By gladdening. Yeah, stage 10. So the way to reach samadhi is not to force, and not to yell at the mind and say, don't be distracted, don't be distracted. And normally we think that's the way, yelling at the child what not to do. No, give this child of the mind something that it likes to do. And then when it gladdens, it comes together. That's samadhi, coming together. Becoming more steady when it's gladdening. So in the Buddha's life, it's said that right after he left his kingdom, he trained for 6 years alone and with other teachers. And then he took the route of, which was the predominant model of spiritual cultivation in his own time, which is underlying that approach of spiritual cultivation is the idea that in a way it's kind of a dualistic system, meaning the flesh, the body is seen as a trap. The spirit or the soul is seen as a prisoner. And the way to solve our problems is to free the prisoner from the prison. So that was like the predominant kind of understanding of what is spiritual work. So the Buddha used that method. So then it said that it went down to the kind of asceticism that he practiced, to the point of like starving himself, where he was only eating 1 grain of rice a day. So all kinds of like basically modalities that of spiritual modalities, that underlying principle is there is a prisoner, there is a prison. You need to separate these two. And it said that he tried that and it didn't get to where he wanted to get to. He knew it wasn't the solution. He trained with 2 teachers in particular. And after not being satisfied by those, it says that he reached these very profound, you could say, or very intense states of experience. What I would actually call, these are mystical states. But actually, he's like, no, that's not the answer. It describe it as like he experienced neither consciousness nor non-consciousness. And he experienced boundless emptiness. And he experienced like boundless, like what we would call one with everything. And then all of that, he's like, no, this is not it. Very interesting. This is not it. You want to experience one with everything? Go ahead. But he says, that's not it. You want to experience nothing whatsoever? Go ahead, but that's not it. He reached all those mystical experiences through like this self-mortification, to mortify the body in order for the spirit to detach. Yeah? Did not work. Just about when he was going to give up and think that he's going to die, because he was on the verge of death, and someone fed him food. Then energy came back into his body. And then it said that then he had a memory of when he was around the age of 7 or 8. There was one very special occasion during the harvest festival, or not harvest, this is sowing. There's a sowing festival in the spring. So his father being the king, and everybody was gathered in the fields, and there was a lot of festivities going on, and everything was really good. He was happy, everything. But in the midst of all the festivities, he withdrew and went and sat underneath a tree. And it said that when he sat underneath the tree, somehow his mind entered a natural state of ease. And then his mind became more collected and more collected. And now at the age of 35, as he was almost dying, after eating the rice pudding, he remembered that experience. And he said then he got up and walked over to the tree that he's been sitting under, and he sat there and let it just naturally settle, and that led to enlightenment. Something to do with this gladdening of the mind, coming together of the mind, where he was no longer fighting. Very interesting that it's not mind over matter. It's not about mind over matter. It's not about transcendence. It's not about intense experiences of the mind, although I think somewhere along the way, Buddhists went back to trying those things. Fine, fair enough, human beings are curious. You know. But if we pay attention to the Buddha's story and take it seriously, you know, we can learn a lot from. Yeah, Buddhists eventually went back to starving themselves and, you know, doing all kinds of fantastical mental, you know, gymnastics. Very impressive, you know.
Some of us are still good at that.
Yeah, you know. But no, we're like very serious, like meditation. You can see, you know, like it comes back. But it's fine. I think it meets certain other needs. You know, people reappropriating what the Buddha. I don't happen to. I'm not a fundamentalist in that way. I'm a fundamentalist in other ways, I'm sure, but not in that way of like, oh, back to original Buddhism, everything that came afterwards is wrong. It's not. I think it's more complex than that. So certain things that, yeah, the Buddha set aside, later Buddhist traditions may kind of bring it back in, but using it in a different way. That's fine. But if we forget the basic story and the basic lessons to be learned from there and get too carried away by later bringing in of other things to help enhance, you know. So particularly like in the Tibetan tradition, it's not a Tibetan creation. When we say Tibetan tradition, it's just the full development of Buddhism in India until Buddhism disappeared from India. All of that went to Tibet. And so it's a very big system that got retransplanted in Tibet and then further developed there. There's a lot of things that, like the historical Buddha said, no, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. But then, as it unfolds, things were brought back in. But with different understanding. So I wouldn't say brought back in to destroy the religion. Some would say that. There's this evil Brahmins that, pretended to be Buddhist, and then they brought back all these things that the Buddha threw out in the first place, and they call it Buddhism. It's just Brahmanical religion wearing Buddhist robes. I don't believe that. But nonetheless, the early stories about the main lessons of the Buddha, we should not forget. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Just out of curiosity, somebody told me that sati,
Mm-hmm.
you can translate also as like maybe to remember,
Yes, yeah, memory.
and how applicable that might be in the name of the sutta, right? To remember.
Yeah, to remember, so I said earlier, good question. I need to clarify. It just means memory, actually. But now we say mindful. Yeah? But so what does it mean to be mindful? Which is to remember. Yeah? So what are we remembering? We're remembering something that we already know. Right? You can't remember something new. Yeah? So what we're remembering is remembering to come back to the breath, to come back to the breath, to come back to the breath. So then there's also maranusati, which is another type of sati, which is death. Yes, to remember that you will die. So to remember, yeah. But it's now become this big word, mindfulness. So to come back, to come back, to come back. And so let breath be, in a way you could say, let breath be your anchor. Even just that, without pursuing the Buddha's program, if you let breath be your anchor, at the very least you will be much more healthy. And then die, of course. But much more healthy. And therefore, much more pleasant to be around. That's a lot to be said about that.
So what does the anapana part?
Anapana. Breathing in, breathing out. Anapana. Yeah. Literally. Inhale, exhale. Anna and apana. Ana apana. Come back to the breath, come back to the breath. Now, since we won't really have time to look at the third and the fourth, but at least I will point to some of the things going on there, right? If you look at 13, I will breathe in observing. Here the verb is to observe. So to observe, to discern, right? They're basically in the same vicinity. But discern has more a sense of like telling apart, one from the other. Right? So discerning there is discerning long or short. Right? But then here, observe is observing inconstancy, which is usually translated as impermanence. Yeah? But impermanence is maybe further down the road of inconstancy. And so I chose inconstancy, more kind of no judgment, no value judgment there. Just a fact. Yeah? Things are inconstant. Right? So this is basically the main truth, or the main characteristic of the characteristics that the Buddha identified with confused existence is said to be characterized by suffering, dukkha, not self, anatman, yeah, and then inconstant, anitya. So of the three, in this 16 steps, inconstancy is the only one directly kind of highlighted. Because after observing inconstancy, you observe dispassion, which is, what is dispassion? Dispassion is letting go. Don't engage anymore. Don't engage what? Don't engage that which is inconstant, hoping for constancy to turn up. So dispassion. And then with dispassion, cessation can happen. Cessation of what? Cessation of the opposite, grasping. So this dispassion is the opposite of clutching, holding. Cessation happens. Then after cessation, relinquish. That's like completely done. Okay. Now, I do think that why breath is chosen as the topic, among other reasons, is related to, finally at 13, like inconstancy becomes very obvious. How? The whole experience of breath is inconstant. Breath is one breath after another breath, after another breath, after another breath. So in a subtle way, you're already training your mental, emotional, physical muscles to recognize the truth of inconstancy by having breath. The interesting about breath is, right? Without it, you'll be finished. But to be with it, you cannot own it. And you cannot make it stay the same. Its very nature is inconstant. In, out, in, out. At any moment, there is only one thing happen, and that thing happens only for a moment. Even the span of one inhalation is actually not one thing. There are many moments. It's all momentary. So when you cultivate this, by the time you get to 13, it's already in your system on all levels that you get. So to observe inconstancy at that point is no longer just an intellectual acceptance that things are inconstant. You know that even the most basic, fundamental quality of being alive, breathing, is inconstant. Continuous, but inconstant. And so, I think it's designed this way. Because the Buddha could, at 13, substitute it with, instead of inconstant, then burdensome, suffering. Or not self. But that's not what he highlights in 13, is inconstancy. inconstancy or impermanence in the end is also emptiness. Different words, but talking about the same thing. Then slightly different implications, but still talking about the same thing. Impermanence and death and emptiness. Right now, you think, oh, so emptiness is bad news. No. Emptiness is the flip side of impermanence and death. It's the good news side of the same story. Bad news is inconstant. Good news is empty.
Constantly empty?
Yes. Oh, bad news, you're falling. Good news, there's no ground. Right? Then no problem. I mean, really, the fear of falling is the fear of hitting ground, right? But if there's no ground, the only problem with falling is eventually it'll hit ground. But if there's no ground, so that's the emptiness. Right, then what's the problem? It's like being born in the, what do you call it? The country fair, right? All these rides that are so scary. That's also the thrill, I suppose. You're like, no fun if there's no ground. Then falling has no meaning. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's end the day on page 9 with the recitations on page 9. So this completes like the cycle, so to say, the framing for why are we doing what we're doing, why did the Buddha teach this, for what purpose, you know. We close the cycle by doing what we call the dedication prayers. By this merit may I achieve the all-knowing state. May all who wander on the ways of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating enemies of faults and delusions. Heroic Manjushri knows everything as it is, and Samantabhadra does as well. So too will I follow in their path and perfectly dedicate accumulated bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. May the life of the teachers, glory of the teachings be firm. May this world be filled with holders of the teachings. Fortunes possessed by benefactors of teachings increase. May all auspicious, so that the teachings remain perpetually. So we will be back here tomorrow, starting at 9, same time. And tomorrow I think it's 9 to 1, or is it? Yeah. 9 to 1, 9 to 12, I don't know. 9 to 1. Okay. Tomorrow is 9 to 1. So in between we'll have a break, a coffee break. So have a good evening. See you tomorrow. And then if you have registered for this, we will send you the available resources. Like I said, I mentioned, there are recordings from other series on the same topic. And we'll send you the videos for that. And Jeff might have already found the guided meditation part. I'll go check and see if that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so we will send you all that. If you have registered, then that's one of the reasons we asked to register, so that after the program, we can send you the resources that we know of that we have. Have a good evening.